Hi, this is Jens Neuse. I'm the CEO of WunderGraph, and today I'm excited to show you an interview we did with Benjie Gillam. He's the creator of Grafast, and he's a member of the GraphQL Technical Steering Committee. So he's a TSC and highly involved in the GraphQL community and GraphQL working groups. So we met Benjie at API Days Paris right after our presentation on our new algorithm, Fission. Fission enables you to design APIs around requirements and then derive subgraphs from that. So it's a completely new approach. And yeah, Benjie is a highly regarded voice in the GraphQL community. So I really like to share his perspective on our new approach. And so yeah, enjoy. Benjie, well, what is your first impression? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was really impressed with it. So Fission, I find is quite interesting because it looks at the problem from the other side. It basically, like GraphQL itself, was always designed to be used by the client. Like it's very much a client-focused technology. And what Fission does, from what I understand, is it takes that same ethos to the whole supergraph, subgraph problem and essentially says, what do I need on the front end? Let's describe that. Let's get the people involved who are responsible for each of these parts, and helps to push that problem all the way down into the relevant subgraphs and into the microservices, but without bringing the complexity of the whole problem. So you can focus on just the bit that you care about. You can scope it out. The design of it was fantastic. It's very obvious. And I love the ability to see the code owners or the responsible people for each section. Really, really helpful, I think.
Yeah. So you've probably built so many GraphQL servers over the years. So you have plenty of experience working with GraphQL, working with different clients. If you think about your experience over the last couple of years, and you scope that to schema design and governance, what would you say were the biggest pain points and the biggest problems you saw, and how does it relate to the work we've been doing? Because you can probably assume if you don't really start with use cases, if you just focus on your backend or your database or something, or even if you generate an API from a database, we will end up with a completely different graph. So how do you think about that?
So there's a lot of different approaches to building a GraphQL schema, and there's a very large range of users of GraphQL, right down from one-person startups all the way up to the largest of enterprises. And all these different areas on this diagram, on this graph, have different needs. And certainly when you're at the high end, your issues are there's all these different teams and they all have different ways of doing things. Often they're implementing their subgraphs in different languages. They've got different conventions. You even end up with things like people doing snake case versus camel case. There's really big issues. So there's some tooling that you can put into place to standardize certain things, like camel case versus snake case is very easy to solve. But there's much more I lose the word, but there's more insidious problems than that, such as name versus first name, last name, where they may be inconsistent in different parts of the system because different people have different outlooks on what that data should be. So I really like the idea with Hub that it essentially gives you this ability to pull in the kind of people who would be involved in those decisions and help make it consistent, but without having to bring in everyone on every team to still try and maintain this kind of consistency.
Yeah.
It's quite easy to have a consistent GraphQL schema if you're the only person working on it, but yeah, as you scale up, it does get more.
One other aspect we wanted to achieve is also we wanted that solution to be more inclusive for different personas, like the front-end developer, designer, also the product owner, with the super simple visualization. If you look into your past, do you think it was always that easy to involve all the different stakeholders if all you have is looking at a schema?
That's an interesting problem in general. When you're talking to the non-technical people, GraphQL is fairly approachable from a simple type definition perspective. They can understand if you've got type user, and it's got a first name and a last name, and those are strings, and it's got an age, which is a number or whatever, an int, then they get that. Like, that's fine, that's easy, and they can say, hey, I want to add this I want to add avatar URL to user. That's straightforward. But once they start having to think more deeply about all the interconnections, I think the non-technical folks quite quickly can get lost in the complexity. And we just saw in Ivan's talk just now how like just turning off and filtering different parts of the graph can suddenly make the graph much more approachable. And so yeah, it is an issue. If you're only dealing with technical folks, it's quite easy to just talk in terms of SDL modifications, like let's use this as our interchange language, so we can say, hey, I want to add this field, and the backend goes, oh yeah, sure, but actually it should be nullable, or we would prefer it was a separate subtype rather than just an address field that's a string, for example. But once you start involving the broader range of people involved, yeah, you do have those issues.
Yeah. One concept we borrowed, we took the idea from Mark Lara from Yelp, this dream query workflow. Were you aware of this blog post?
I wasn't, no. I'm looking forward to reading that later.
Yeah, sometimes it's good to look into the archives. I mean, it's already like 5 years ago. But does it make sense for you to start schema design with a query?
Oh, of course. I mean, GraphQL was always designed to be a client-focused language. So it should be not entirely dictated by one client, like your mobile client shouldn't dictate it and then your web client have to subscribe to that, for example, but it should very much be motivated by the needs of your range of clients. So yeah, it absolutely makes sense to start there. It's not always ideal to start from the other end and to surface what the back end is doing. Of course, it depends on what the shape of your team is. Sometimes things are actually the same thing all the way through the stack, and in which case there's not much value from building abstractions that just basically say, yeah, it's a copy of that other thing again. But once you get like bigger domain models and they become more complicated, what's in your schema should be the things that you want your clients to consume. Especially one of the things that you see with GraphQL, if you're doing it well, is you're using fragments well, right?
Fragments.
So you're putting fragments next to your components, and they are describing the data that is needed exactly for that component. And so if you do that, then the need that you had previously in previous solutions for like client-side models kind of goes away. You don't really need a client-side model. You just want to render like a user's name and their avatar, or a post title and its list of tags, or whatever your other piece of data is. And you don't really need those models anymore, so long as the shape of what you are presenting through the schema is the right thing for you as a client. So yeah, it should always be client focused.
Which, by the way, like I'm such a big fan of fragments, and one of the next steps we want to evolve that solution into is, you saw in the demo we make like a box around the UI component, and then we build a query. But what if we make a box, and inside the box we make more boxes? These are fragments, and we can somehow name them. So we name our fragments, and then we're not just generating schema, but from all of that, we can actually generate the client.
The full component model, yes.
The full client, and we can also generate how the components would be named and such. And maybe that even is enough to then, I would say, like feed that into an LLM that gets a lot of understanding of the UI we want to build. We have screenshots, we have fragments, we have components, we have data masking and everything. And then maybe we come to a place where we can take ideas from Relay, but make them much simpler and more approachable.
Yeah, that sounds really compelling. And of course, surfacing those things as individual components in your storybook as well, while still populating it with sensible data, sounds very compelling.
Benjie, I thank you a lot for this short interview. Anything else you want to share about Grafast or your own work with the community?
Oh yeah, so the main project I'm working on at the moment is Grafast, which is a new planning and execution engine for GraphQL. It's intended for like when you're building the schema yourself. So it's not for doing like supergraph stuff, it's more for the subgraphs themselves, or just for monolithic schemas. But essentially it challenges the execution model that GraphQL's always had with resolvers, and says that resolvers like aren't great. They introduce the n+1 problem. We then try and solve that with like data loader, but that's not actually a very good solution. It results in a whole bunch of other problems, but also it just doesn't solve the problem as well as it could be done. So Grafast turns that problem on its head and essentially says, let's start again and do the execution algorithm ahead of time before we've got any data. Let's plan out what needs to happen and then just process the data afterwards. So yeah, that's the main thing I'm working on in my own open source, and loads of other stuff on GraphQL spec things.
What's your Grafast slogan?
Don't do it half-assed, do it graph-assed.
Yes. Ciao.